My name is Jessica Turner, and for 34 years, I lived in the shadow of expectations I could never seem to meet. Growing up in the suburbs of Seattle as the eldest child of Linda and Robert Turner meant carrying the weight of potential I apparently never fulfilled. I still remember the first time I realized I was different from the rest of my family. It was during a Sunday dinner when I was 12, and my father was discussing his latest real estate acquisition downtown. My younger brother Mark, only 7 at the time, asked intelligent questions about property values and investment returns that made my parents beam with pride when I mentioned my interest in art and design. My mother patted my hand and said, "That's nice, dear, but let's focus on practical matters." That moment crystallized something I would spend the next 2 decades trying to deny. In the Turner family, I was the black sheep, the disappointment, the one who would never quite measure up. As I stand here today in my corner office overlooking the Seattle skyline, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass, I can finally tell my story. The story of how the family failure became the architect of an empire's fall. The story of how underestimation became my greatest weapon. This isn't just about revenge. It's about justice, recognition, and finally claiming the respect that was always denied to me. And it all began with a family dinner that changed everything. The annual Turner Family Gala had always been a source of anxiety for me, held at the Willowbrook Estate in Denver. It was ostensibly a celebration of family unity and business success, but it always felt more like a performance review, where I inevitably received a failing grade. September 14th, 2022, would prove to be different, not because I would finally gain my family's approval, but because I would finally stop seeking it. I arrived fashionably late, partly due to my delayed flight from Seattle and partly because I dreaded these gatherings. The grand ballroom was already filled with relatives, business associates, and the social elite of Denver. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathering, highlighting the wealth and privilege that defined the Turner name. My mother spotted me immediately. Linda Turner, at 60, was still striking with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer gown. She approached with that familiar look of barely concealed disappointment. "Jessica, darling, you made it." Her kiss brushed my cheek, cool and perfunctory. "That dress is interesting. You could have called me for recommendations." I smoothed down my navy blue cocktail dress, purchased on sale at a boutique in Seattle. "I like this dress. Mom, it's comfortable." "Comfort isn't everything, dear." Her eyes flicked over my simple gold jewelry and sensible heels. "Appearances matter in our circle. Speaking of which, did you do something different with your hair?" I resisted the urge to touch my shoulder-length brown hair, which I'd recently had cut into a more professional style for work. "Just a trim." The sound conveyed volumes of disapproval. "Well, come say hello to your father and Mark. They've been discussing the new development in Chicago. So exciting." I followed her through the crowd, accepting polite greetings from relatives who barely remembered my name. My father and brother stood near the bar, deep in conversation with a group of investors. Robert Turner's imposing figure commanded attention, his tailored suit and confident stance reflecting his status as the founder of Turner Realty Consortium. Beside him, Mark looked like a younger version, confident, polished, and every inch the golden child. At 29, my brother had already made partner at Whitfield Legal Group, specializing in corporate mergers and acquisitions. His success was a constant refrain in family conversations, a standard against which my modest achievements were measured and found wanting. "Ah, Jessica." My father's greeting was cordial but distant. "Glad you could make it. Mark was just explaining the tax advantages of our new investment structure to the Andersons." Mark flashed his perfect smile. "Hey, sis, nice of you to join us." He turned to the couple beside him. "My sister works in, what is it now, Jess? Advertising?" "Marketing," I corrected. "I'm a marketing manager at Pinnacle Marketing Group." Right. Mark nodded dismissively. Anyway, as I was saying about the Chicago development, I was effectively dismissed, relegated to the background as the real business discussion continued. This was the Turner family dynamic in a nutshell. Mark shining in the spotlight while I stood in the shadows. My contributions minimized. My presence tolerated rather than celebrated. I drifted away toward the bar, ordering a gin and tonic that I hoped would dull the familiar ache of exclusion. My cousin Emma approached, her expression sympathetic. As the family lawyer, she occupied an interesting position, technically part of the inner circle but somewhat removed from the direct line of succession. "They're in rare form tonight," she murmured, nodding toward my parents and Mark. I sipped my drink. "When aren't they?" "Fair point." Emma glanced around before lowering her voice. "Just a heads up. There's going to be an announcement later. Something big about the family business." My stomach tightened. "What kind of announcement?" "I probably shouldn't say, but..." She hesitated. "It's about succession planning. Uncle Robert is looking toward the future of Turner Realty." I didn't need further explanation. The implication was clear. Mark would be named heir to the Turner Empire, a $500 million real estate consortium built by my parents over 3 decades. Despite being the older sibling, I had never been considered a serious contender for leadership. "Thanks for the warning," I said, forcing a smile. "At least I can prepare my congratulatory face." Emma squeezed my arm. "I'm sorry. Jess, you know I don't agree with how they treat you." The dinner bell chimed, saving me from having to respond. We filed into the dining room, a cavernous space with a long mahogany table set for 50 guests. I found my name card near the middle of the table, safely distanced from the head where my parents and Mark would sit with the most important guests. Dinner proceeded as expected. Exquisite food that I barely tasted. Conversations about business deals and acquisitions that deliberately excluded me, and the occasional pointed question about my little job in marketing. I answered politely, years of practice allowing me to maintain a pleasant facade despite the subtle barbs. "Jessica's company does social media for small businesses, don't they, dear?" My mother commented during a lull in conversation. "Pinnacle is actually one of the largest marketing firms in the Pacific Northwest," I corrected gently. "We handle comprehensive marketing strategies for several Fortune 500 companies." "How nice," she replied with a dismissive smile. "Mark just closed a deal with Amazon last week, $500 million in property acquisitions." And so it went. Each of my modest achievements countered with Mark's more impressive accomplishments. By the time dessert was served, I had retreated into silence, counting the minutes until I could reasonably excuse myself. Then my father stood, tapping his crystal glass for attention. The room fell silent. "Friends and family," he began, his voice commanding respect. "Thank you all for joining us for another Turner family celebration. As you know, Turner Realty Consortium has been my life's work, built from nothing into what it is today, one of the premier real estate development companies in the country." Murmurs of agreement and appreciation rippled through the gathering. Linda and I have been blessed with success beyond our wildest dreams, but no success is complete without legacy, which brings me to tonight's announcement. My heart pounded as I met Emma's sympathetic gaze across the table. It's time to look to the future of Turner Realty. After careful consideration and consultation with our board, I'm proud to announce that my son, Mark Turner, will be taking on the role of Executive Vice President, with the intention of succeeding me as CEO within the next 5 years. Applause erupted around the table. Mark stood, accepting the congratulations with practiced humility, embracing our father as cameras flashed. "Mark has shown exceptional business acumen and leadership," my father continued. "His education at Harvard Business School and his experience at Whitfield have prepared him perfectly for this role. The Turner legacy will be in capable hands." I sat frozen, my hands clenched in my lap. It wasn't a surprise. I had expected this announcement for years, but the public nature of it, the complete absence of any acknowledgement of my existence, cut deeper than I had anticipated. When the applause died down, I heard myself speaking before I could stop the words. "What about Grandma's wishes?" The table fell silent. My father turned to me, his expression a mixture of surprise and irritation. Excuse me? I stood, steadier than I felt. Grandma Turner always said the company should benefit all her descendants equally. She believed in family equality. My father's face hardened. Jessica, this isn't the time or place. When is the time, Dad? When were you planning to discuss this with me? Or was I just supposed to read about it in the company newsletter? You've never shown interest in the family business, my mother interjected, her voice sharp with embarrassment. I was never given the opportunity, I countered. Mark was groomed for this role from childhood. I was pushed towards suitable pursuits for a daughter. Mark cleared his throat. Jess, come on. You're making a scene. We can talk about this privately. Like we talked about the loan you had me co-sign for family unity? Or the family property that was sold without my knowledge? My father stepped forward, his voice lowered but intense. That's enough, Jessica. You're showing exactly why you're not suited for leadership. Emotional outbursts have no place in business. I looked around the table, at the uncomfortable expressions of relatives and business associates, at Emma's pained face, at my mother's rigid disapproval, and at Mark's mixture of embarrassment and pity. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of seeking approval, of trying to prove my worth to people who had decided my value long ago, suddenly seemed absurd. You're right about one thing, Dad, I said quietly. This isn't the place for this discussion. Enjoy your celebration. I placed my napkin on the table and walked out, ignoring my mother's hissed command to return. The ballroom doors closed behind me with a satisfying thud, cutting off the murmurs that had erupted in my wake. Outside, the September air was cool against my flushed skin. I made my way to the parking lot, fumbling for my car keys as tears blurred my vision. My 2017 Honda Civic sat among the luxury vehicles of my family members, another visible reminder of the disparity between us. Inside the car, I finally let the tears fall freely. Years of suppressed hurt and anger poured out as I gripped the steering wheel, my body shaking with sobs. The glow of my phone screen caught my attention. Messages from my mother already. Your behavior was inexcusable. You've embarrassed the entire family. And from Mark, way to make my moment about you. Sis, real mature. I stared at the messages through my tears, a strange calm beginning to replace the hurt. I typed a message to my mother. That decision wasn't fair. Grandma wanted equality. Her response came immediately. You're too sensitive to handle real responsibility. This is why Mark is in charge. Come back inside and apologize. I didn't respond. Instead, I started my car and drove away from the Willowbrook estate, away from the Turner family celebration, away from decades of trying to be someone they could accept. As the city lights of Denver blurred past my windows, a realization crystallized in my mind. I had to stop apologizing for existing. I had to stop seeking their approval, and more than that, I had to show them exactly who Jessica Turner really was. What my family didn't know, what I had carefully kept from them for years, was that I was far more than the underachieving daughter they dismissed. Behind the modest job title and the affordable car was a different reality entirely, one I had built quietly while they were busy underestimating me. And now, it was time for them to learn the truth. My one-bedroom apartment in Seattle's Belltown neighborhood wasn't impressive by Turner standards. No sweeping views or doorman, just a comfortable space I'd made my own. But it was here, at my simple IKEA desk in the corner of my living room, that I had built something remarkable. The morning after the disastrous family gala, I sat at that desk, my laptop open to a spreadsheet that told a very different story than the one my family believed about me. 6 years earlier, frustrated by the limitations of my then entry-level marketing position, I had started a side business. Elevate Digital Solutions began as a one-woman consultancy, offering social media management to small local businesses who couldn't afford the rates of larger agencies like Pinnacle. What had started as a way to earn extra income had evolved into something much more significant. By identifying a gap in the market, personalized, data-driven marketing strategies for mid-sized businesses, Elevate had grown exponentially. I hired freelancers at first, then full-time employees who worked remotely while I managed everything from my apartment. The numbers on my screen confirmed what I already knew. Last year, Elevate Digital Solutions had generated $1.2 million in revenue. My personal take-home from the business was nearly 4 times my salary at Pinnacle, where I deliberately maintained my ordinary position as a shield against family scrutiny. And that was just the beginning of my secret financial life. I clicked to another tab, reviewing my investment portfolio. 3 years ago, I had taken a risk that would have horrified my conservative parents, investing $300,000, nearly all my savings at the time, in a startup called Cascade Technologies. The cloud computing company was now valued at $8 million, and my early stake had multiplied accordingly. Then there were the patents, 3 of them for social media analytics algorithms I had developed, currently licensed to several major platforms. The licensing fees alone provided a comfortable passive income that I reinvested rather than flaunted. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father and I expect an apology. Call us when you're ready to be reasonable." I set the phone aside without responding. For years, I had compartmentalized my life. The dutiful, underachieving daughter my family saw, versus the successful entrepreneur I had become. I had kept these worlds separate, partly out of a lingering hope for familial approval, and partly because I enjoyed the freedom that came with their underestimation. But after last night, something had changed. The public anointing of Mark as the Turner heir apparent, without even the courtesy of a private conversation with me first, had shattered any remaining illusions I held about my place in the family. I opened my email and composed a message to Sarah Jackson, my attorney at Morrison & Associates. We had met 3 years ago at a tech conference, and she had become both my legal counsel and a trusted friend, someone who saw me for who I really was, not who my family expected me to be. "Sarah, I need to meet. It's time to discuss the Turner situation. Are you available tomorrow?" Her response came within minutes. 10 a.m. at my office. Bring all documentation since 2018. I spent the rest of the day pulling together files, emails, text messages, contracts, financial records, anything that documented the pattern of exclusion and manipulation that had defined my relationship with my family. The loan agreement from June 2018, when my parents had pressured me to co-sign for $20,000 that was supposedly for family investment, but had somehow never benefited me. The property sale documents from 2020, when my share of a family vacation home had been liquidated without my knowledge. The proceeds redirected to one of Mark's pet projects. Each document told part of a story of systematic disregard for my rights and interests. Together, they painted a damning picture of how the Turner family operated when it came to their disappointing daughter. By evening, I had compiled everything into a comprehensive file. I ordered takeout, barely tasting the pad thai as I continued to work, mapping out potential scenarios and strategies. My phone buzzed periodically with messages from family members, my mother's increasing irritation, Mark's self-righteous lecture about family loyalty, even Emma's tentative peacemaking overtures. I read them all but responded to none. Around midnight, exhausted but clear-headed, I made a decision that would set everything in motion. I opened my laptop one last time and sent an email to Victoria Lawson, CEO of Pinnacle Marketing Group. "Victoria, I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss a potential acquisition opportunity that could significantly expand Pinnacle's portfolio. This is confidential, but I believe it could be transformative for the company. Are you available this week?" Her response arrived despite the late hour. Intrigued, my office, Wednesday, 8 a.m. I closed my laptop and went to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline glittering against the night sky, for the first time since walking out of the family gala. I smiled. The game had begun. Victoria Lawson's office reflected her approach to business, clean, modern, and without unnecessary ornamentation. At 52, she had built Pinnacle from a small local agency into a regional powerhouse through strategic acquisitions and an unerring instinct for market trends. "Jessica," She gestured to the chair across from her desk. You've got me curious. What's this opportunity? I placed a folder on her desk. I'd like to propose that Pinnacle acquires Turner Realty Consortium. Victoria's eyebrows rose. Turner Realty? Your family's company? Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Turner is valued at what? Close to $500 million. Pinnacle isn't in a position to make an acquisition of that size. I'm not suggesting Pinnacle should do it alone, I replied. I'm proposing a partnership, Pinnacle, my company Elevate Digital Solutions, and a consortium of investors I've been in discussions with. Victoria's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. Your company? This is the first I'm hearing of it. I've kept it separate from my work here for obvious reasons, I explained. Elevate specializes in digital marketing for mid-sized businesses, with a focus on real estate and financial services. We've grown significantly over the past 5 years. I handed her another folder containing Elevate's financials. Victoria reviewed them with the quick efficiency of someone accustomed to evaluating business propositions. Impressive, she acknowledged, but I'm still not seeing how this gets us anywhere near the capital needed for a Turner acquisition. That's where the investor consortium comes in. I outlined the group of venture capitalists and private equity firms I had approached, all of whom had expressed interest in the potential of combining Turner's real estate portfolio with Pinnacle's marketing expertise and Elevate's digital innovation. The synergy would be significant, I continued. Turner has an extensive property portfolio but outdated marketing and technology infrastructure. Pinnacle would gain a major client and equity in a diversified business. Elevate would scale its operations through access to both companies' client bases. Victoria studied me with new interest. You've been planning this for some time. Let's just say I've considered the possibilities. And your family? They're open to selling? They don't know yet, I admitted. But they're planning to take the company public next year. My proposal would offer a premium over the projected IPO valuation, which would be difficult for the board to reject on purely financial grounds. But this isn't just about business, is it? Victoria's gaze was shrewd. This is personal. I met her eyes steadily. Every business decision has personal elements. Victoria, you taught me that. Yes, there's history here, but the business case is sound, regardless of my last name. She nodded slowly. Send me the full proposal. I'll need to review it with the board. But Jessica, she paused, if we move forward with this, there's no going back. Your family won't forgive you. I stood, gathering my materials. Some things aren't about forgiveness. They're about correction. As I left Victoria's office, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your silence is childish and disrespectful. The family expects you at the board meeting in Chicago next month. Time to act like an adult. I smiled slightly as I typed my response. I'll be there. The following weeks passed in a blur of meetings, negotiations, and preparation. Sarah Jackson helped me navigate the legal complexities of the proposed acquisition, while Victoria worked with Pinnacle's board to secure their support. The investor consortium grew as word spread about the opportunity, attracted by the unique combination of assets and expertise the merged companies would represent. Throughout it all, I maintained my regular routine at Pinnacle, giving no indication that anything unusual was happening. To my family, I presented a facade of contrition, agreeing to attend the upcoming board meeting in Chicago, where Turner Realty would finalize plans for their IPO roadshow. October 5, 2024, arrived crisp and clear in Chicago, the Hamilton Plaza. An elegant downtown hotel owned by Turner Realty would host the board meeting in its executive conference center. I arrived early, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that projected confidence and authority, a far cry from the interesting dress my mother had criticized at the family gala. The conference room was still empty when I entered, giving me time to set up what I needed. I connected my laptop to the projection system, verified that all my files were accessible, and placed copies of a document folder at each seat around the massive table. At precisely 9:45 a.m., the room began to fill. Board members, executives, and key investors filed in. exchanging greetings and small talk. My father and Mark arrived together, deep in conversation with the company's CFO. My mother followed shortly after, her expression tightening when she saw me already seated. "Jessica," she acknowledged coolly, "I'm glad you decided to be reasonable." "I'm exactly where I need to be, Mom," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. My father approached, his manner businesslike. "Since you're here, you might as well stay for the opening presentations. We'll break for lunch before discussing the IPO details. Those sessions are for voting members only." "Of course," I said agreeably. "I understand protocol." Mark shot me a suspicious look, but said nothing as he took his seat near our father. At 10:00 a.m. precisely, Robert Turner called the meeting to order. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this critical meeting. As you know, Turner Realty Consortium stands on the cusp of a new era. Our planned initial public offering next quarter represents the culmination of 3 decades of work and positions us for unprecedented growth." He proceeded to outline the company's history and achievements, painting a picture of uninterrupted success and strategic brilliance. The narrative conveniently omitted the market downturns they had weathered, the questionable deals that had sometimes kept them afloat, and the family dynamics that informed decision-making. Before we continue with our CFO's presentation on valuation, I believe Jessica has requested a few minutes to address the board. As a courtesy to family, I've agreed to this brief interruption. All eyes turned to me. I stood, smoothing my jacket as I moved to the front of the room. "Thank you, Dad. I appreciate the opportunity." I connected my phone to the room's audio system. "Before I begin, I'd like to play something for everyone." I pressed play, and my father's voice filled the room. "Jessica has never had the temperament for real business. She's too emotional, too unfocused. Mark is our future. Jessica is, well, a daughter is important in other ways." The recording was from a private conversation with an investor 2 years earlier, one that Emma had shared with me out of concern. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "That's enough," my father said sharply, moving toward the audio controls. "This is inappropriate and unprofessional." "Is it?" I asked calmly. I thought the board should understand the leadership philosophy that guides Turner Realty. Family dynamics are relevant when they influence business decisions. Wouldn't you agree? Before he could respond, I continued. "But you're right. We should focus on business, which is why I've prepared an alternative proposal for the board's consideration." I activated the projector, displaying the title slide of my presentation. Proposed Acquisition of Turner Realty Consortium by Pinnacle Elevate Partnership. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Mark half rose from his seat, his face flushing with anger, but our father gestured for him to sit. "What is this?" my father demanded. "A legitimate business proposal," I replied, my voice steady. "I represent a consortium of investors, including Pinnacle Marketing Group and Elevate Digital Solutions, who are prepared to acquire Turner Realty for $75 million, a premium of $5 million over your projected IPO valuation." "This is absurd," Mark interjected. "Jessica doesn't have the authority or the resources for something like this." "Actually, I do," I gestured to the door, where Victoria Lawson now stood with 2 executives from the investor consortium. "My colleagues can confirm the legitimacy and financing of this offer." As Victoria and the investors entered, I continued my presentation, outlining the business case for the acquisition, the synergies, the growth potential, the enhanced market position the combined entities would enjoy. Throughout, I maintained a professional demeanor, focusing on facts and figures rather than emotion. My mother's face had gone pale, her hand covering her mouth as the reality of the situation dawned on her. Mark alternated between furious note-taking and whispered consultations with our father, whose expression had hardened into a mask of controlled rage. "The board has a fiduciary responsibility to consider all legitimate offers," I reminded everyone as I concluded. "The documents before you provide the details of our proposal, including proof of financing and the projected benefits to shareholders." My father stood, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "The board will need time to review this. Unexpected proposal. We'll take a 30-minute recess. As the room emptied, with board members already engaged in intense discussions about the offer, my father approached me, flanked by my mother and Mark. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, keeping his voice low despite his obvious fury. "Business," I replied simply. "Isn't that what you taught us? Seize opportunities, leverage advantages, create value for shareholders?" "This isn't business. This is betrayal," my mother said, her voice trembling. "Your own family, Jessica." "Family?" I echoed. "Was it family when you manipulated me into co-signing that loan? When you sold my share of the vacation property without my consent? When you systematically excluded me from company operations while grooming Mark as the golden child?" "Those decisions were made for the good of everyone," my father insisted. "You've never understood the bigger picture." "I understand it perfectly," I countered. "And now, so does the board. They have two options. Proceed with an IPO under leadership that has demonstrated questionable judgment, or accept a premium offer from a partnership with proven innovation and market vision." Mark stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "This is impossible. You must be lying about the financing. You're a marketing manager, for God's sake. Where would you get the backing for something like this?" I smiled. "That's the thing about underestimating people, Mark. Sometimes they surprise you." Victoria approached, effectively ending the family confrontation. "The investors are ready to answer any questions the board might have. Jessica." "Thank you, Victoria." I turned back to my family. "If you'll excuse me, I have a business proposition to discuss." The remainder of the day unfolded like a carefully choreographed drama. The board, initially skeptical, became increasingly interested as the details of the acquisition were explained. The premium offer was compelling, but equally important was the vision for the combined companies, a modern, integrated approach to real estate development and marketing that addressed weaknesses in Turner's current model. By late afternoon, a preliminary vote had been taken. 7 board members in favor of the acquisition, 3 opposed, 2 abstaining. My father, as chairman, found himself outvoted for perhaps the first time in the company's history. "This isn't final," he insisted as the meeting adjourned. "There are regulatory approvals, due diligence. All already in process," I informed him. "We've been preparing for this for months. The preliminary paperwork has been filed, and our legal teams are ready to proceed." As the boardroom emptied, leaving just my family and me, the full impact of what had happened seemed to finally register with them. My mother sank into a chair, her perfect composure cracking. "How could you do this to us?" she asked, genuine bewilderment in her voice. "After everything we've given you?" "Given me?" I repeated. "What exactly did you give me? Mom? Criticism disguised as concern? Comparisons to Mark that I could never win? The clear message that I would never be good enough?" "We pushed you because we wanted you to succeed," my father insisted, his anger giving way to a defensive tone I had rarely heard from him. "No," I corrected him. "You pushed Mark to succeed. You pushed me to conform, to be the daughter you wanted instead of the person I am." "And this is who you are?" Mark interjected. "Someone who stabs her family in the back for revenge?" "This isn't revenge, Mark. It's correction. For years, you've all operated under the assumption that I was less capable, less ambitious, less worthy than you. Today proved otherwise." "By destroying what our parents built?" he challenged. "By saving it," I countered. "Turner Realty hasn't innovated in a decade. Your leadership would have continued the same patterns, the same approaches, until the company became irrelevant. This acquisition creates something stronger, more adaptable, more prepared for the future." My father shook his head slowly. "You won't get away with this. There are still ways to block the deal." "You could try," I acknowledged. "But consider the consequences. A public fight would reveal things the Turner name might not survive. The questionable financial maneuvers, the family conflicts, the outdated business practices. Is that the legacy you want?" The question hung in the air between us, unanswered but understood. My father gathered his briefcase, his movements stiff with suppressed emotion. "This discussion isn't over," he said finally. "We'll be consulting with our attorneys." "Of course," I replied calmly. "Mine are available whenever you're ready to discuss transition details." They left without another word, their exit marking the end of an era, both for Turner Realty and for our family. I remained in the empty boardroom, the weight of the day's events finally settling on my shoulders. This wasn't how I had imagined my relationship with my family would evolve. Despite everything, part of me had always hoped for reconciliation, for recognition, for acceptance. But as Victoria had warned, some bridges couldn't be rebuilt once burned. The question now was what I would build instead. The aftermath of the Chicago board meeting unfolded with the intensity of a storm. News of the acquisition broke the following morning, sending ripples through the business community. Pinnacle Marketing acquires Turner Empire for $75 million. The headlines proclaimed. Financial analysts debated the merits of the deal. Industry insiders speculated about the future direction of the combined companies, and social media buzzed with the unexpected twist in the Turner family saga. Taps. Turner. Takeover became a trending topic, with over 200,000 tweets in the first 48 hours. The narrative quickly took shape, the underestimated daughter returning triumphant to claim her birthright. It wasn't entirely accurate. I had no interest in merely replacing my father as the head of Turner Realty, but the story resonated with people who saw reflections of their own family dynamics in the corporate drama. My parents' reaction was predictable. First came the legal maneuvers, a flurry of motions and filings designed to delay or derail the acquisition. When those proved ineffective against our meticulous preparation, they shifted to personal attacks. A defamation suit appeared, claiming I had misrepresented my capabilities and intentions to the board. That lawsuit lasted exactly 2 weeks before being quietly withdrawn. The evidence we presented in our initial response, recordings, emails, documented patterns of behavior, made it clear that pursuing the matter would only further damage the Turner reputation. Then came the emotional appeals, orchestrated primarily by my mother. Relatives called with concerns about family unity. Childhood friends reached out, suggesting I reconsider my harsh actions. Even Emma, who had initially supported me, expressed worry about the escalating conflict. "Your parents are devastated, Jess," she told me during a rare phone call. "Your mom hardly leaves the house anymore, and your dad? I've never seen him like this." "They're experiencing consequences," I replied, more calmly than I felt. "Maybe for the first time." "Is that what you wanted? To hurt them?" I considered the question seriously. No, what I wanted was to be seen, really seen, for who I am and what I'm capable of. The hurt is a side effect of their unwillingness to do that for 34 years. On November 1st, 2024, less than a month after the board meeting in Chicago, my parents announced their separation. The news came not directly to me, but through a family-wide email, formal, detached, citing irreconcilable differences exacerbated by recent business developments. Reading between the lines, it was clear that the acquisition had fractured whatever foundation their relationship had been built upon. Mark's trajectory changed as well. Unable to accept his diminished status as Turner Realty, transitioned to new ownership. He resigned from his position and from Whitfield Legal Group, whose leadership had been uncomfortable with the negative publicity surrounding the Turner name. Last I heard, he had taken a position with a boutique firm in Boston, still successful by most standards, but far from the empire heir he had expected to be. As for me, the months following the acquisition were a whirlwind of activity. The integration of Turner Realty, Pinnacle, and Elevate required countless hours of planning, negotiation, and implementation. I moved into a loft in downtown Seattle, closer to the combined company's new headquarters. My role as Chief Innovation Officer placed me at the center of our transformation efforts, working closely with Victoria and the leadership team we had assembled. The work was challenging but exhilarating, the chance to finally apply my vision and expertise to something meaningful. to be valued for my contributions rather than measured against impossible expectations. The teams from all three companies came together remarkably well, united by a shared vision of what we could build together. Throughout this period, I maintained minimal contact with my family. My father's emails were strictly business-related, concerning the transition of assets and operations. My mother's messages gradually shifted from recrimination to tentative reconciliation attempts, though always framed in terms of what I had done to them rather than any acknowledgement of their role in our fractured relationship. Mark didn't contact me at all. In December 2024, I attended a technology conference in San Francisco. During a networking reception, I encountered James Harrington, a former college classmate who had gone on to found a successful software company. "Jessica Turner," he said, approaching with a warm smile. "I've been reading about you. Quite the corporate chess player, aren't you?" I laughed, the sound surprising me with its genuineness. Just finally playing my own game instead of someone else's. We spent the evening in conversation that ranged from business strategy to philosophical discussions about family dynamics and personal growth. James was intelligent, thoughtful, and refreshingly direct, qualities I had come to value more than ever in recent months. "The headlines focus on the revenge aspect," he observed as we shared a late dinner, "but that's not really what this was about, was it?" I considered the question. Revenge implies that hurting them was the goal. It wasn't. Standing up for myself, creating something valuable, being recognized for my capabilities, those were the goals. The fact that it disrupted their comfortable narrative was a consequence, not the purpose. "And now? What's the purpose now that you've proven your point?" The question lingered with me long after we parted ways, prompting a reevaluation of where I stood and where I wanted to go. The acquisition had been a means to an end, but what was that end exactly? Was it just about proving myself to a family that had never seen me clearly? Or was there something more substantial I was building toward? As January 2025 arrived, bringing with it the formal completion of the acquisition and the beginning of our first fiscal year as a combined entity, I found my answer. This wasn't about the past anymore, about old wounds or family failures. It was about the future I was creating, the company I was helping to build, the relationships I was forming with people who valued me for exactly who I was. One evening, as I worked late in my new office, I received an unexpected visitor. Emma stood in the doorway, looking both uncomfortable and determined. "Your secretary said I could come up," she explained. "I hope that's okay." "Of course," I gestured to a chair. "What brings you to Seattle?" She sat, fidgeting with the strap of her designer handbag. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about my role in it." "Your role?" "I knew how they treated you. I saw it happening for years, and I never really stood up against it. I'd make small protests, little attempts to balance things, but I never directly challenged the narrative they created about you." I nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. "When you played that recording at the board meeting, the one I gave you, I realized I'd been complicit in a way, providing information but not actually taking a stand." She met my eyes directly. "I'm sorry for that." The apology was unexpected, and I found myself momentarily at a loss for words. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Emma continued. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now, and I admire what you've done, even if the rest of the family doesn't see it yet." "Thank you," I said finally. "That means more than you might think." She smiled slightly. "So, Chief Innovation Officer, impressive title." "It's not about the title," I replied. "It's about finally being able to create something meaningful, something that reflects my vision instead of someone else's expectations." "And are you creating something meaningful?" I thought about the projects we had launched, the teams I was leading, the culture we were building. "Yes, I think I am." After Emma left, I stood at my office window, looking out at the Seattle skyline now bathed in evening light. The past year had transformed everything: my relationship with my family, my professional identity, my understanding of my own capabilities and worth. The journey had been painful at times, disruptive and challenging in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. But standing there, watching the city lights emerge against the darkening sky, I felt no regret. The Turner legacy would continue, but it would be a different legacy than my parents had envisioned. One built on innovation rather than tradition, on recognition of value rather than adherence to hierarchy, on seeing people for who they truly were rather than who others expected them to be. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "In Seattle next week for meetings? Dinner?" I smiled as I typed my response, looking forward to it. The Turner family story wasn't over. There would be more chapters, more complications, more opportunities for both conflict and reconciliation. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by my place within that story. I was writing my own narrative, on my own terms, with my own voice. And that, more than any acquisition or corporate title, was the real victory.